Okay, so what I had originally said before was that I was just going to kind of not necessarily seek out the original Netflix movies as they came out unless I was starting to hear, like, really undeniably great things about them, but, obviously we hit a bit of a dead week since nobody wants to compete with Infinity War, so I figured now would be a good time to catch up. Just in case I missed anything that was, like, maybe secretly good or hiding or something like that. As you can see, I probably should have known better, but we did manage to, I did manage to get to 16 of them throughout the course of a couple of weeks in preparation, so, yeah, and it was, because here's the thing, is that I'm not anti-Netflix or anything like that. I know that's like a big debate now with the whole can thing, but it's not really anything like that. It's just the stuff that they're putting out isn't really all that great. And the thing about it is everybody's complaining, like, why won't film festivals and stuff like that, take movies like this that come from this platform and all that, and it's like the whole seeing it on a theater screen type thing, and it's like, that's not, the fact that they're not shown in theaters, at least widely, is not really my personal problem with them. It's just that none of them are really good enough to be at these festivals anyway, so it's like a whole other thing that's like that's hardly even looked at. That's a huge issue here, but obviously, from what I hear, people are reacting though, and it is kind of like you've got half the people saying, "Oh, Netflix is like the future of movies and all this," and then you have the other half, the side that I'm more on, which are saying Netflix is more like the new straight to DVD. So with some coming in, like Quaron's new movie is surely going to be one of the exceptions and stuff like that. The fact that we started on something like Beast of No Nation. But yeah, for the most part, we've got the movies like these. And before we go on, I'll also mention that if you hadn't seen or whatever, and which would explain why they're not here, the ones that I actually have touched on that have come out this year were the Cloverfield Paradox, Mute, The Outsider, The Poker King, The Open House, Before I Wake, and A Futile and Stupid Gesture. I think that's all of them, which is already enough. But yeah, so those you can find elsewhere if that interests you. And obviously there's three here that are, most of these are ones that Netflix actually put out, like, as they were made under the name, but there's also, like, Anon, Kodachrome, and The Titan, I think, are ones that were, like, already made that Netflix just bought and released. So I think those are actually the first three. So with that being said, let's go right into that now. Starting with Anon, which is, I was kind of excited about because it was Andrew Nichols' new movie, who had done, he did like Gattaca and, oh god, I'm gonna draw a blank now, In Time, Lord of War, he wrote The Truman Show, and he's a dude that's all about these really high concepts. I know I'm missing at least one in there, but, what he's really done here is he's kind of going in that same vein. It's kind of the same vein as In Time, not just from Amanda Seyfried's presence, but and I actually like In Time. I know a lot of people kind of thought he was starting to fall off by then, but I still like it well enough. But he does, take these big leaps with these huge concepts that people are very keen to poke holes in. Like, the bigger the concept, the more it's like there's going to be a lot of things that may not add up, but yeah, and here it's basically like, it almost feels like the intention was to go for like a Minority Report thing, but instead of like seeing the future, it's kind of also conveniently ties into the whole, surveillance, further lack of privacy thing, where the government can see through the eyes of, like, not just see through their eyes, but know, like, every time they walk by them, there's, like, stats and all that shit, where they just have a huge, like, every single possible file on a person's life, just right on hand. And they obviously use this to solve murders until there's a hacker that, we're going back to the 90s now, I guess. There is a hacker villain that can go in and is getting away with murders because he's able to hide his identity or whatever, he or she. And what it does here, it does have some interesting kind of visual looks to it, kind of like the way they play with the aspect ratio, where it's obviously wider when it looks normal, but then it changes when we're seeing through their eyes and seeing what the world looks like through the identifying whatever. It's but the thing here is that this is kind of like, and there are some interesting things in here that he certainly finds to use, like the way this hacker can manipulate what exactly it is that they see. Like, they can make it seem like elevator shafts have elevators in them, so when you go to step on them, or something like that. Or even make it look like the stairs are different than they actually are, if in the event that they're being chased by Clive Owen. They can do that too. But the thing here is that it only goes so far because it goes into the whole, oh, but is what we're seeing actually real thing? And it eventually kind of goes down that path and gets to that territory of, after a while, once you really put together, what if nothing's as it seems, and they start to play it up like that, it's kind of like, it gets really easy to stop caring because everything you look at, you just automatically assume must not be what it seems. And the more the movie goes in those predictable directions, once it sets that up, it's like, you see what they were going for, where that could be something that's really disorienting and mysterious, but it just becomes annoyingly obvious after a while, regardless of how creative it tries to be with it. And then we've got this character who's like the prime suspect in Amanda Seyfried, who comes in, and it's like, for starters, I feel like she's miscast, very much so, because she's supposed to be threatening, which she doesn't do very well. There's, like, the line when they're, like, saying, like, you know, what if, you know, we were to determine this about you or whatever, and she says, then you'll wish you were fucking dead. But it's like, there's just, hearing that line from her just does nothing in regards to its effect. And it's like, these people should not feel threatened whatsoever by this person. And also, it's another one of those movies where it has to do its sci-fi thing, since now that we've set up this world, we have to basically watch this world as it is. Like, when they're doing all the investigating. It's like the scene in Blade Runner when he's just, like, enhancing over and over and over again, and it goes on forever. There's a lot of that like this. And for most people, if I say Blade Runner, that probably sounds like I'm complimenting Anon, which I'm not. Because it's like, it's this movie's job, basically, like, if it's gonna do that stuff, it's the movie's job, which this genre has succeeded at, and many movies have succeeded at plenty of times, which is to make the most mundane things still seem really interesting, just by the way they're portrayed, and it just doesn't work. And the Clive Owen character does need, like, I feel like he would have worked a lot better if he had a lot more mystery about him, like if he didn't really have a backstory, and if he was just kind of, it almost just kind of seemed like he was this blank government figure. Like, that would sound boring, but it almost, like, if you have a certain array of mystery to him, which I think Clive Owen really could have pulled off. He's the kind of actor that could have done it. But it's, obviously they do give him a backstory, and it's a very cliche one. And also, I suppose it does figure in because they do find ways once they hack into him to, like, use that to their advantage, but that's not to kind of, you know, use it against him, but it doesn't really, yeah, it just doesn't come together in a very effective way at all. It all feels very obvious kind of from the get-go, and you can kind of sense where everything is going to go, which a movie like this should really just be throwing you all over the place, in a good way, but it just doesn't. It also doesn't help that it's one of those movies where if you read the description on Netflix right before you hit play, that pretty much gives you the last 20 minutes or so of the movie. Like, that's a description of the last 20 minutes, basically, as opposed to the movie itself. Which means that, should you see that, there is, like, no suspense, no mystery, or no point to most of their investigation, or what it is they try to piece together. And that's just, yeah, and like I said, trying to do the whole everything may not be what it seems thing just kind of ends up being, once again, a kiss of death, and makes you stop caring more and more, as opposed to pulling you in more and more as it does that. So, That is kind of unfortunate. I do kind of seem like his concepts aren't paying off the way they used to, but maybe there's still something in there. Like, one of these days he's going to come back in a really big way and give us, like, another Gattaca or another Truman Show script or something, but in the meantime, we've got movies like Anon, so there's that. Let's go right into Kodachrome now, which is another one of those movies talking about cliches, where the father and the son haven't gotten along, they haven't seen each other in years, and they really don't like each other. The son especially doesn't like him. He sees him as a deadbeat that was horrible to their family and then just ran away or whatever. And now, in the father's dying moments, it's like, let's reconnect and go on a road trip. Because they're going to stop printing Kodachrome film, and that means the world to me, so I've got to go all the way to the last place in the middle of nowhere that's doing it, and you're going to come with me because we're going to reconnect. Me and the nurse that you may or may not have a love interest in because she happens to be really hot, Elizabeth Olsen. Oh, but let's wait and see where that goes because we have no idea as soon as we fucking see her walk on screen. And yeah, if you've seen movies like The Open Road with Jeff Bridges and Timberlake, or like Around the Bend with Christopher Walken, I think it was Josh Lucas. These movies that were never really that good to begin with, and we're just continuing that. And it's like, it's the easiest thing you can possibly do to make some heartfelt tearjerker of a movie. And it just feels like the sincerity is just becoming less and less. And it's not to say this movie doesn't have sincere moments. Or, inspired moments in how they're made. Like, the opening shot is kind of nice, where it's like a nice long take that starts on a photograph and then comes out, and then it's Sudeikis, and we, like, see him walk from this place to, like, down alleys and, like, through back entrances and then backstage and then onto a stage where a band is performing. And it's like, that's a really impressive opening shot for a movie like this. But then, once we get past that, we meet his character. And this is one of those characters that's... I guess... I don't know. That's one of the movie's main problems. I don't know if we're supposed to be on his side with how much he hates Ed Harris going into this. We probably are. But it's not one of those things to where you don't really wonder if you're supposed to be on his side or not. You just kind of instantly aren't, because he just comes off so pathetic, and it's like, and it gets kind of really, there's something really childlike about the way that he is that I don't know, that it doesn't really work from any possible stance. Whether it be like, oh, well, he's been through a lot, and it's like, oh, well, we understand why he hates this guy so much. But it's like, when he's having dinner with Ed Harris in his house, and for the most part, he's being cordial, or at least as cordial as this guy is capable of, and then they're sitting at the dinner table, and he just says, so how long you got left? And it's like, it's that thing Bill Hader was talking about, where it's like, when you think of Jason Sudeikis talking, you always imagine he's chewing gum for some reason. And it's like, so how much you got left? And it's like, I don't know who you're supposed to hate here, but you're not really on board with either one. And this is before the road trip starts. This is before these people get in a car and spend time together and go all the way wherever the fuck, in like Kansas or something. And yeah, but that's the thing, is it's like, there are just these little moments in here that Ed Harris especially brings, to where it's like, you feel like there is a touching movie in here somewhere, but it's just so bogged down with all these cliches and this unlikable, intolerable lead character. And it's like, and Sudeikis has, been in this territory before. Remember, I don't know if anybody saw The Book of Love with him and, what's her name, Maisie Williams, I think, and that movie was just absolutely embarrassing. I saw that movie last year, and I'm still vomiting when I think about it sometimes. But the thing is I feel like he is capable of this, even if he hasn't really gotten there yet. Colossal was like the closest he's gotten to really bringing a dramatic performance to life. But I do feel like maybe this could have been stronger, maybe. With like a more experienced actor who could have found their way around the shitty material and actually made something like really worthwhile, and we'd be more on the good side of things and being like, yeah, it's cliche, but, instead of saying, it could have been good, but, and then the majority is the bad stuff. So, and honestly, because that, even though he doesn't really I feel like a more experienced actor could have been better. It still weirdly feels like really obvious casting on everybody's part. In regards to like, because Sudeikis, like like if you'd seen the Book of Love, it's kind of like now you kind of think Sudeikis is one of those guys where it's like, oh well, he's in comedy and all that, but you can just tell he'll occasionally do a movie like this to say, hey, this is my dramatic side. Like how embarrassing it was when Krasinski did Away We Go. Kind of like, oh, not to that quite level of embarrassingly, annoyingly indie, but we're treading the line. And then this eventually gets. I was talking about the whole thing with Olsen, where this is one of those movies where they may or may not get together, and when they may or may not get together, it might end with the next morning, just for no reason at all, she says, I can't do this, and leaves. And it's like, and it's one of those movies that throws all of its conflicts at you at once, and most of them, it's like the Olsen thing, are just like, okay, so you already had plenty of conflicts going on. Why is this even here? But yeah, it's basically, and it basically sets up for like a really half-assed attempt at closure in like the very last scene. It's like one of the most half-assed attempts at closure I've ever seen, at least for a long time. It's like we really needed an ending that was somewhat upbeat, so that's why we injected this, even though it bogged down most of everything that was in its path. But, as I said, I feel like, unlike movies like this, which I can just dismiss immediately and say they're fucking pieces of shit, there is something, especially between the scenes with him and Harris, like, just alone. It's like, I feel like there's something in there. And when they get there and it's like, he gets to see Ed Harris for, like, the idol he was to so many people. And it's like, there's just a tiny little piece in there that does work. Just enough to frustrate you even more when everything else is just so... all the shit we've seen before that wasn't good to begin with and we're still doing now. Which just bogs it down more, so... yeah, it's frustrating. But let's go on quickly to The Titan, which is Sam Worthington in another sci-fi movie, but obviously this isn't Avatar, not the size, not the scope, not anything. It's, what is it? It's 2048, and it's one of those, we get the whole thing, Tom Wilkinson's talking to us, and he's telling us everything we've heard before. It's like, it's the future. Half the Earth is inhabitable. Half the population will starve to death. The same old shit. So the idea is to live on on Saturn's moon. So it's like we're going to colonize that moon and we're going to get everybody there since the Earth is going to go downhill and just really fuck itself up. But the thing here is that this ends up not really being the focus of the movie. That's honestly its biggest problem. Is it does set this up and it's like, it feels like explore territory, but I feel like there's something really interesting here. And just when you get to that, there might be something interesting here point, it just doesn't matter anymore, quite honestly. It was just the setup for this bland-ass shit that we've seen bland-ass before. It's like, sort of like The Astronaut's Wife, sort of like that whole subplot in Prometheus with Logan Marshall Green after he was infected. And it's like the person slowly starts... it turns into like a body horror thing. And the person slowly starts to become something that they weren't before, something more inhuman or whatever. And then it gets to the point to where it's like... I mean, we do get into a direction to where it's like, it's a been there, done that territory, but it's like, unlike Kodachrome, which was doing something that wasn't that great to begin with, this is something that's been done plenty of times before in a much better and much more interesting ways, which just kind of amplify the dullness of this. Because we do have, like... The fact that also doesn't help is that I was talking about how they change... like, it feels like we have a great setup, but then they just abandon it because that's just what it is the setup, and then we're dealing with something else. That's not the only time it feels like that. It feels like we're kind of constantly changing our perspective on what the fuck we're even looking at anymore. And it's like, his wife, Sam Worthington's wife is Taylor Schilling, and we're kind of suddenly just at one point starting to see everything from her perspective, and then it becomes her goal to do whatever. And it's like, the movie's kind of so uneven, it's like we're not even really sure when we got to this point. But that's just what it is now. But then we'll eventually go back, and it'll be like some weird monster movie with some pretty ridiculous makeup that makes it really hard to take seriously. The more it gets harder to take seriously, the more almost horror that it is, and it's for a lot of the time it's like really gross and really unpleasant, but not in like some Cronenberg way, not in like, it's there's nothing really effective about it. It's just that gross and unpleasant, until we just move on to the next thing, and it's just never. And you would think at some point, shifting around this much, at least one of the aspects would be interesting, or it's like we'd have one aspect of it besides the opening to say, okay, just try to stick with that and maybe you'll be okay. But no, none of them really. It goes all the way back to the, hey, remember when we were gonna like go to the moon thing, Saturn's moon at that? It's that felt so long ago in this movie that's like an hour and a half at most. So that's if I would say it feels like a lot of missed opportunities, but it really just kind of felt like not really exploring much of anything that it could have. And we're not even sure if that would have been interesting to begin with. So there's that. Very minor for something that seems like it had quite a bit put into, especially on paper. Seems like it'd be like really big and really expensive, but it's just that. It's just something that easy to just lay out, which is really unfortunate. So, yeah. The next one is gonna be Game Over, man. This is one of those ones where I started it and I got like 10 minutes in, and I got tired of Adam Devine's bullshit and I gave up on it. That was like last month. So I was like, oh, I guess I'll go back to it and see what happened. Daniel Stern was in it. That somewhat had my attention. So yeah, it's him and his buddies who apparently were on this show called Workaholics. It was on Comedy Central. I don't know what the hell that show is, but I hear its name a lot, especially when Adam Devine's brought up. So apparently it had a lot of fans. I don't even know what the hell it is. And if this is any indication, given I heard like a lot of the cast and crew are the same, and it was almost like a carryover, I don't think I'll be watching Workaholics anytime soon. And the thing here is that basically it's like these guys were trying to put themselves in a Die Hard movie. Not just a Die Hard movie, Die Hard. Like the first Die Hard. But it ends up coming off more like the Paul Blart movies with a lot of gore and a lot of dicks. Honestly, I feel like that probably would appeal to a lot of people. But this is not, because the thing about it, the thing that's really amplified in this movie, that we're going to talk about a lot as this video goes on, is that these comedies that Netflix is putting out, and there are a lot of comedies that have this problem, but I mean, Netflix comedies seem to have this problem even worse than theatrically released movies, and that is thinking that movie references are funny just by themselves. The title of the movie is a movie reference, and most of the dialogue goes into this, and it's like, it feels like, I don't even remember I remember the first 10 minutes had like a reference to Moonlight, but then going on, it's like they're gonna do the zipline thing, and I swear to God, they say Home Alone's title like 6 times, on top of dropping Kevin McAllister's name, on top of the fact that Daniel Stern is in the movie. And that's how jokes play out in this type of movie a lot of the time, is people just shoehorn in movie references, and it's coming around. When that happens, obviously we're not quite there, but when I think about that, it feels like we are reverting. Like, we are coming back to a time that we thought was gone. When, remember those spoof movies, like Epic Movie and Meet the Spartans and all that shit, where their humor was entirely based on the audience being able to say, I know that movie, I know what they're talking about, hence that's a joke. That it feels like we are slowly coming back around to that, with how much Netflix comedies rely on other movies being the butt of their jokes by just being name dropped. It's like, I don't know if it's because I watched all these in like a 2-week period, which felt really close together, that it really shows that, but it's like, it is unbelievable how much this happens. To the point, like, if you watch them individually, like, months apart, you may not notice. But, oh my god, like, half the fucking dialogue in Netflix comedies is saying the names of other movies, a lot of the time for no reason. And like I said, we will touch on that as we go. And yeah, this movie feels like a huge, like, poster child of that crime. And obviously none of this is going to be helped by the fact that, I've said many times before how much I hate Adam Devine. I have no idea how anybody finds this dude funny at all. And it's like, because everything that he does, you can, like, he's obviously so over the top in just the way he does anything at all. But it's definitely more of, like, there's much more of a cringe factor to anything else than being funny. But the thing is, it's like, in this day and age, when you say that, you have to think, okay, maybe his intention is to go for the cringe thing or whatever. But the only problem is that there's still something, even if that was his intention, there are still some things. I am so incredibly joyless watching this guy on screen. And there's... Yeah, but he's got another movie on here, so we will go more into him. I don't want to just, completely hate on him. Once again, maybe he's a nice guy in real life, and I'm a piece of shit for just going on and on about how much I can't stand the fucking sight of him, let alone him trying to be funny. But, on that also, this is also a movie that's... just kind of going along with that, I was talking about the gore and the dicks, and this is another one of those movies where it's like, what seems to be this movie's money scene, I guess, is this mind-numbingly prolonged scene of Adam Devine without his pants or anything down there. And this scene goes on for a very long time. Once again, okay, maybe that's a bit unconventional these days, so maybe you want to give them that, maybe that was their intention. But it seems like just the presence of dicks, the makers of this movie think is the height of comedy. And that's obviously not working. The Daniel Stern joke got very quick and gross, or got very gross and very played out very quickly. But then on that also, there's another running joke, that just, it's a running joke, but then it just kind of disappeared. The fact that one of the dudes vapes. That's the joke. One of them, I guess it's because it's a character trait. Like, that's his identifiable character trait. And that's about it. And there's also stuff where I'm not even sure if it's a joke or not. Like, the fact that everybody, okay, so the setup of the movie is that these guys are really, really incompetent. And just, okay, they're incompetent and they're fucking stupid, yet apparently they're also technical geniuses, that can create, on a whim, by the way, like, apparently this is something they've been doing for years and years and years and years, but then when it calls for, like, an action scene or for them to save the day, they can just do it in no time flat. But at the same time, being complete fucking idiots is the whole setup, so I don't know how these things ever came together. And they were like, yeah, these are our characters. These things perfectly line up. Let's do that. But the villains in the movie, too, are also completely and totally idiotic and incompetent. And it's like, I can't tell if that's a joke or not, or if the writers don't even realize it. One of the dudes is credited as writing it, but I'm going to assume this was a joint effort overall. I assume. Because a lot of it just feels like, hey, just let the camera run, and we'll let our improvisational genius take over. And then we get the shit that happens. It's them saying stupid fucking nonsense that doesn't have any cohesion whatsoever to each other for like 15 minutes while carrying around used condoms, because, once again, hilarity. Until, once again, villains show. Neil McDonough shows up. I was talking about this basically being a Paul Blart movie. I am pretty sure Neil McDonough was also the villain in the second Paul Blart movie, so there is that. I do like that somebody called out his creepy blue eyes, though, so there was that. So yeah, I did find this movie mind-numbingly idiotic and really, really not funny whatsoever. But I take back the whatsoever because every now and then, I guess as a miracle, this movie is capable of something funny. Like, the bit with Shaggy is kind of funny, and the scene where they're shooting at each other is kind of funny. But this movie is like an hour and 40 something minutes. And I can think of two scenes where I'm like, okay, they did something funny there. So that means the rest of it is Adam Devine doing his bullshit, and the rest of the movie doing its bullshit. And there's, yeah, I mean, I would say they're really trying hard for their laughs, but I don't even know. It's just, a lot of it just seems so half-assed dialogue-wise, but then when they go for the physical gags, it's almost like, you can tell for a movie like this, it's really over the top, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like it's over the top enough to accept it as such. To where it's like, it just, as is, it just feels like gross out stuff. It doesn't feel like something that's just so out of place over the top that it's actually funny. It feels like it it falls right in the middle to where it's like, yeah, it's over the top, but it just comes off as desperate, as opposed to working in that kind of over-the-top fashion that it probably would have in a better, funnier movie, certainly a smarter movie, certainly a more well-thought-out movie, which this movie's none of those things, so, yeah. We're going to go to a totally different one called Irreplaceable You, which I wasn't really quite sure what this was going in. I knew, like, the vague concept, but when it started off, it basically seemed like I kind of thought I was watching a coffee commercial, and then I was like, wait a minute, it's Hulu that has ads, not Netflix, so what the fuck am I... Oh, this is the opening of the movie. This is not, in fact, a coffee commercial. So, once that happens, we realize that Yugi Watara, who is our main character, is dead. She tells us right up front, she's narrating from the grave, and the opening scene is her boyfriend, fiance, whatever, at her grave. And then she's like, this is how my story ends. But let's go back to the beginning. So it's one of those. And then it's like, okay, so what did she die of? Was it a horrible accident? How early in the movie, like, how much are we going to know before she dies? And then what happens after that? Well, for starters, how we get to that point that she knows that she is dying is that she's under the impression that she's pregnant. And there's a joyful scene at the beginning when she goes to the doctor and she's like, they're thinking about, are they gonna have a boy or a girl? And it's like, oh, we gotta prepare for everything. I can't believe we're gonna have a baby. And it's like they're telling everybody. They didn't want the secret out, but the secret's out now, and everybody's like so excited. And then the doctor comes in and she's like, oh, I'm sorry. I know you're like really, really happy about having a baby, but it turns out you're not having a baby. And if that's not hurtful enough, what you thought was a baby is actually a tumor, and you're going to die. And that's it. So that's basically describes the emotional outlook of the movie, too. This is one of those movies that basically says, I exist to make you cry. No matter how insincere I am about it, I'm going to do anything to make that happen, with most of the time as little effort as possible. So, going on that, I was trying to figure out exactly what it was going to do, because surely it's not just another person's dying of cancer movie. Surely they would not give us another one of those and pass it off as something, like, original. Well, because my first thought was like, okay, maybe it's gonna be like by the title, it's like, maybe it's gonna be like a reincarnation thing or something. It could be, or it's like, maybe it's gonna be like, we cut back and forth, and we see, like, their past and their life together, but also his life without her after her death, because why else would the movie begin with him at her grave? And it's like, maybe if we go back and forth, there'll be, like, some weird parallels that kind of come together, and it's like, that'll be interesting, maybe something like Sliding Doors or something. No. No, it's another this person's got cancer movie. And that's all there is to it. None of those other possibilities even remotely come into play. So, that's what we're dealing with. And we get to meet characters like the weirdly uncouth and intrusive nurse guy. We have no idea. He's the guy from Veep. We have no idea why he's like that, why he talks to her like that. It's just his character trait, and I guess we're supposed to accept it. No idea how he got this job, but I think it's supposed to be charming. But that pretty much speaks for the whole movie. You just watch the whole movie going, I think this is supposed to be charming, but I'm really put off right now. So yeah, maybe that's the point of his character. He just sums up the whole movie just by existing. So as it goes on, we do meet other cast members that you're really surprised to see. And they're all in this group. Like, you would think maybe they're sprinkled throughout the movie and it's, like, full of these colorful characters. No, they're just all dumped in this one area of the movie when she goes to one of their support groups. And it's like, the dude at the head of the support group that runs it is Steve Coogan. And then she befriends somebody that's there that's dying, that's Christopher Walken. And then there's somebody else over here who has cancer in this group, and it's Kate McKinnon. Yeah, just a whole variety of people here. Really, really fucking talented people. And these little scenes in this support group is all we have with them together in. And nothing really happens in them. The characters just kind of bitch at each other. And then it goes on. She eventually develops a friendship with Walken, and they go around and they do shit. There's kind of somewhat a subplot that seems like it's going to be the whole movie, where she's basically trying to set him up with somebody else, her boyfriend, before she even dies. Her boyfriend's the guy from The Age of Adeline. And it's... yeah, it just kind of keeps going in different directions, and ultimately is just what I said it was. It's just another somebody sick and dying movie, and there is no other kind of life brought into it. And there are scenes that, like, it almost kind of feels like it's... I was so confused about why it would start in the cemetery with us knowing that she's dead. Even though we know these movies eventually end up there, it's like there's always kind of those moments where you, like, maybe you have, like, a false sense of hope or something, or they do something that where you don't know the outcome of it upright. Like, right. But the thing here is that it's... outright was the word I was looking for. What we have here, though, is, like, it feels like an absolute, like, just a complete and weird trick played on the audience. And I don't mean, like, they thought something was happening in the movie that actually wasn't. I'm talking a trick in regards to, like, the audience automatically knows already that she does die, so they're gonna have to... basically, it's a way to make the audience feel sad through the whole movie without having to earn it. You just start off by saying, a person died of cancer, and you automatically have made them sad, and you're like, and watch her live through that now. And it's like, every other turn is going to make you cry, because we set that up from the get-go. And then, should they squeeze an emotion out of you, they can stand back and say, ah, see, we pulled it off, because we're so talented? I think not. It feels very, very deceptive in a horrible way. And, once again... to magnify the total lack of depth here, once again, like Anon, this is one of those movies to where you read the description on Netflix, and that's not really the movie, that's like the last 15 minutes. And then that's where we go. So, basically, what it comes to is that you can't really say anything in this movie is a spoiler, given what the beginning is, because that's it. That's what we're leading towards, is what we know in the first scene. There's nothing in between here. There is no new information to get to that point. It's like, they tell us in the beginning she's dead, and the rest of the movie is, this is how she got to being dead. And that's it. But the annoying thing, though, was that at the beginning, there's the whole thing where there's one reaction to a certain event that they could have had, like, right up front. And honestly, that could have, like, completely altered the plot. That could have been what the whole movie was, well, okay, I've still got some time, let's at least do this, because we can still do that. But instead of them doing that right off, like they very easily could have, it's the end. It's the last 5 minutes. I don't know. It's a pathetic attempt to be pull up the heartstrings movie, and it really fails at it. But if you're like a sucker for these kind of movies, you might fall into it. But unless you're like a diehard fan of people dying of cancer movies, Number one, what's wrong with you? Number two, this might be for you, so go ahead. The next one is going to be Roxanne Roxanne. Once again, there honestly isn't a whole lot to say, especially since we just had patty cakes, like, not that long ago, these movies don't feel all that separate from each other. It's patty cakes and thumb sucker, because for some reason our lead character has a thing about sucking on her thumb that doesn't amount to anything. It doesn't. Well, I think I believe this is a real character, so I suppose we're going on real world traits here, but it doesn't have anything to do with the story, so that's in there. But and she starts off as a 14-year-old, and she finds out that she can rap, so she's like, I can maybe turn this into something. Only problem is that she's held back by her overbearing mother, who is Nia Long, who I kind of had to do a double take or a triple take to recognize, to her credit. But she's basically doing, like, the first half we start to think, is she going to try to be Monique and Precious? But then the second half is kind of like, we see there's a more compassionate side to her, and it's like they do what they can to make her a complex character, but overall she's the overbearing mother that holds her daughter back. We've seen it before. And as it goes on, as it starts, it did feel like there was one small detail that actually worked quite a bit. It was so small, but something like that, as early as it came, is enough to kind of set a mood and kind of make you optimistic as like a moviegoer, or whatever it is in this case. Where there's the whole thing of, when a movie starts, it shows you the location. And that's it, just to tell you where they are. Most of the time you probably don't even think to remember or note that, and it doesn't really matter all that much. But when they show the location here at the beginning, it says, welcome to, and then the location. And it's like, there's something about that kind of pulls you in a way that maybe just showing the location is supposed to do that never quite works. But just adding those two words actually made it feel like the movie was saying, it's really important this is set here, and we're going to thrust you into a certain world, and you're going to feel all this, and it's going to be really real and all that. And yeah, it's a nice touch. I don't know that it worked to that extent, but it's a nice touch regardless. And then we have another character that comes, and it's basically just that. It's basically just, patty cakes for a while. Until we're introduced to Mahershala Ali's character, who's basically, it's almost like he's intentionally the opposite of Juan, his character in Moonlight, to where in Moonlight he saw the child in need, and he took him in, and he was very, paternal to him and all that. Where in this case, he's like really like predatory and skeevy when he goes after the young impressionable person. There's even one scene where I'm pretty sure he's wearing the exact same bandana he was in Moonlight. So it's like, he's totally that guy, but he's also totally not that guy. The thing is, for a while, through like the entire first half of this movie, if not longer, it feels like there's hardly any development. And it's like, these are the people, but then they just kind of do what it is that they do. They just kind of go through, because there's like, their circumstances change, but it doesn't really feel like anything else does in regards to like their character, which weirdly, you would think at least circumstances changing would feel like something's progressing, but it doesn't. It hardly feels like anything is moving forward for like a good hour. And the sad thing is that because it's like, it's not paced for shit, but we do get some time to like, establish who's who, and like there's decent performances and all that. We can tell the characters apart at least. But the thing is that all this is leading to, like, you wait and you wait through all this, and it's like, it's not even some big thing where like, I mean, she does have like a somewhat career that takes off, but they don't even really focus on that. It turns into an abusive relationship movie. And that's pretty much it. That's what we've been building to. It does have, every now and then it does have interesting ways it tells the story, like, sometimes the passages in time are a bit, like, jarring, and, like, you just kind of have to piece together yourself, like, how long are we in the future now? Because there's like overall there's a jump in like 2 years. But then we get this interesting montage where it's a series of screens from the same angle that show us a certain passage in time. That's kind of interesting, but for the most part, it feels, just like I said, just paced like a fucking snail, and not in the good way, and it doesn't feel like it's really building to much of anything, and still manages to be disappointing when it does get in the direction it's gonna go. So, once again, that also is really unfortunate. And then, once we go through all that been there, done that stuff, with the abusive relationship stuff, it just kind of ends. And you really wonder what the point of it all was, but there's just really not a lot there, despite some performances that are okay. And some surprising ones like Nia Long, but for the most part probably won't leave much of an impact once it's ended, so yeah. Alright, so going on, we also have another quite dramatic movie called Six Balloons, which is another one of those, you're not quite sure what the title means until you see how it plays out things, where it's, we have our lead character and her brother, who is Dave Franco. And for a while there, it's kind of like, it's a bit confusing as to what tone they want to go for a while. We do figure it out, but it's a weird road there, because it's like, when it starts off, it seems like it's kind of weirdly, almost like trying to show us in an artistic way that what this girl has going on in her life, but it's being like real artsy about it. But then, once we get into her life as she's preparing for this party for her boyfriend, it's almost like it's setting up some comedy, where it's like those comedies that try to be relatable and have like the lead character be like overly lovable but also have a little bit of attitude about her and all that. And it seems like it's supposed to be like this indie comedy of sorts. But then and then she goes to get Dave Franco, who is apparently a heroin addict. And you're like, okay, that doesn't feel very indie comedy. That definitely feels indie drama, but okay, let's keep going. And yeah, then once this happens, the indie comedy portion of it that we started off with just vanishes. And we go into really dark places now, or what it wants to portray as really dark places. And turns into this really dramatic, artsy thing. Like I said, it felt like back and forth for a while there, but then it really just kind of goes into the heaviness of it. And it's like, and for a while there, it almost seems like obviously it would have been, felt like blatant theft, but there's a portion of the movie where it feels like she's basically walking into her own version of Good Time, the Robert Pattinson movie. But that lasts for like 2 minutes, and then it kind of sets off the rest of what happens, little as that is. And it's, we think what we're talking about here, there's this whole artsy aspect where, like, she keeps hearing waves crashing, and there's, like, a narration, and it's like, it feels like we're setting up something, like, really dramatic that happened in her past or something, or in their past, and it's like, oh, we're just kind of waiting for it to slowly reveal, and it's going to make us wonder and all that. But no, it's actually just absurdly literal symbolism. That's it. And that's not it's not just that part either. There is like symbolism everywhere. The whole balloons thing is that he gets his heroin in balloons, but yet the start of the movie, his little daughter is talking about, oh, I had balloons, and it's like, I guess there's supposed to be some connotation between the innocence of his daughter and her balloons, and his balloons with heroin in them. I guess they think this is profound. I don't know, but it feels like a sledgehammer. And it, like I said, the whole waves crashing thing just gets ridiculously literal by the end, where it's like, is this even if they're going for unsubtle, still, how is this supposed to be effective if you're this unsubtle about using that method of telling this girl's story? But even so, there are some things about this movie that feel yeah, it has not grown on me. But at the time, I felt like there's a little something in here. Obviously, I'm not Dave Franco's biggest fan, but he's not bad here for the most part. And it does feel like it does have like a different. There's something unique about its approach to addiction, given how it fits itself into the plot and how it affects his character in an unexpected way at the halfway point. That movies don't normally portray heroin addiction this way, which that's in itself is interesting and very commendable. And yeah, and there's a little there's obviously going to be I don't suspense isn't the word, but there's something that kind of grips you about it. There, in particular, his daughter is like so innocent and so small. There's like an anxiety you have, like as soon as you see her, even when there's like no danger present. We don't know what Dave Franco's like yet, but then obviously as we get through those scenarios, it's like there is a certain anxiety you have throughout the movie because you're just so terrified something's going to happen to her. But it's I don't even know if that's intentional or not, but so there are definitely things about it that do work, but I mean for the most part it's really bogged down by that really empty symbolism, and it feels like hardly anything is accomplished because the movie is so short. It's like 70 minutes. It's like an hour and 10 minutes, and it feels like such a rushed conclusion too. Like the way it ends, I think we're supposed to, because of the symbolism, we're supposed to feel like everything's probably going to be okay, but it's like, I don't know. I don't know if any of these people are going to be okay. Because they just end it so abruptly, and I guess expect us to believe that this is going to be how their lives go. What this last bit, this big triumphant moment is going to set off, but I don't know. That's too little of a big moment to counter what we've seen up to this point. So I don't really buy that, but there is kind of something in here, but yeah. And we do have a couple more recognizable faces, like Tim Matheson and Jane Kaczmarek doing what I'm guessing is an impression of Allison Janney. So we got that, but yeah. Let's go on to Amateur, which is the basketball movie. That's it. It actually, I was afraid it was going to be. There's another movie called Wolves that Julianne Moore's husband made with Michael Shannon in it, which is not very good, where it's basically just kid plays basketball in high school or whatever. But this is a college basketball movie with a kid that's in 8th grade who is so good, he's been discovered by Josh Charles, and his dad's really, pushing him towards it. And he's able to play with these people that are much older and more experienced than him, but that he may or may not be even better than. But the only problem is he has a condition where he's like blind to numbers, so he doesn't know what the scores are, he doesn't know how much time is on the clock. As far as his schoolwork goes, it fucks with him. And obviously because of this and because of his age, we are going to have the moments where when he meets the team, they're like cartoonishly antagonistic towards him. Even though, and we kind of do the whole like Remember the Titans thing where they're rivals but then they're buddies, but it's like it's just that conflict is so abruptly solved, it makes you wonder why it's even in there to begin with. But it does have some interesting concepts here because it kind of shows the whole kind of shady background of it all, like the whole he's worried about his schoolwork and all that, and they're basically saying like, dude, you're on the team, they're gonna take care of that, you don't need to do jack shit. It's like if you fail the test, you won't fail the test, if you know what I mean. And it's like that's really interesting for them to kind of explore that territory. And see what all kind of shady goings on happens to make that stuff happen, and what else they're capable of, or what they're doing that a lot of the characters may not even be in on. And yeah, and the basketball scenes themselves are really well done. There's actually a competent use of slow-mo throughout some of this. Like slow-mo sometimes seems really overly dramatic or like overused or cliche, but it actually helps in kind of making all this go together. making those scenes work. There's an interesting technique they have throughout the movie that shows we see his rise in popularity through the perspective of his camera, and like the different video forums and the different platforms and how they grow on social media is really interesting. Another interesting aspect is the Josh Charles character, where he's perfectly cast, because Josh Charles is one of those guys where, like, we've seen him play enough guys that end up being bad guys that he's really good at kind of playing, am I shady or am I not? You have to guess that. But even though we do kind of have that vibe of him, still, when it seems like he's trustworthy, it's easy to buy that he totally could be trustworthy. But and actually more like a friend to him and stuff like that. But and he really knows how to play that line really well. So that was a really good bit of casting and bringing him in as the most recognizable face in the movie. But as it goes on, it does feel like that there's something missing a little bit. Like there's, it feel like it does keep your attention, but it does feel like it's like constantly on the verge of reaching, like, really pulling you in and really being engrossing, but it never quite reaches that. It does go into the whole, there's cliche stuff in there, like somebody might just happen to overhear something where somebody just happens to be spelling everything out to somebody that already knows what's going on. So there are some contrivances in there, but there is, it's a really hard movie to kind of pick apart, because it really did kind of win me over, and even if there's those moments that don't really tie together, there's like, even sometimes there'll even be like a line of dialogue where you're like, really, where Josh Charles hands him the playbook and he says, bury your face in that playbook like it's a pillow made out of Rihanna's titties. Those words come out of Josh Charles's mouth. But it's stuff like that. It's fine, I guess, overall. The movie does find a way to work, even if it doesn't quite go past, like, the, yeah, this is pretty good territory. Once again, looking at, the stuff on this list you have to compare it to, that Netflix has been putting out, this is pretty good by comparison, so, it's also got, like, without saying too much, it's got a really heartbreaking final shot, too. That kind of really surprised me that they ended on that note, but it's actually kind of perfect, too, so, yeah, I think that's, like, the first one I can say. Be sure to check that out if you're skipping through. Which, unfortunately, I can't really say about the next one, which is, Come Sunday, and Come Sunday really seemed like it had a lot of potential, because you kind of look at the story and maybe a couple of the stills they have there, and you're like, it kind of just looks like one of those going to church movies. But then you look at the cast list, and you've got Chiwetel Ejiofor, Jason Segel, Martin Sheen, Keith Stanfield, and some others, and you're like, holy shit, okay, let's see what they have in store. Let's bring this cast on, let's see what they've got. And it's like, it's pretty much a going to church movie. that's pretty much it. And it's another one of those real life stories, but there's also Danny Glover, but it's like, this movie continues to prove, like, the more Danny Glover is in movies now, it's like the less his screen time gets as it goes, or it's like, why even cast him? But as it goes on, I wasn't sure what the plot was. I vaguely knew that this guy was going to get in trouble with the church, but I didn't really know how. So he basically, I don't know if it's not necessarily questioning his faith, but he has a lot of questions in regards to the religion. And basically says, if you're, like, cherry-picking what he's saying, you could pull words out of context to where he actually said the words, God is worse than Hitler, during a sermon to all the churchgoers, being one of, like, the big, priest dudes or whatever. And it's like, but it's more so he just has a lot of questions, like, if God should let this happen, if God lets this kind of stuff happen, then that makes him worse than Hitler. But it's like, obviously, with the whole setup, that's what people are going to do. They're going to take those words and they're going to completely oust his ass. And it's kind of like, yeah, it sort of plays itself up like it's going to be like a behind-the-scenes thing in regards to how, like, churches are run, how it's like, yeah, there's all the faith, there's all the God-fearing people and all that, but it's like, in the long run, it's like a business, basically. And it's like, it feels like it should be really interesting territory. This is, like, we've gone through this a couple of times now. It feels like it should be really interesting territory that just never seems to want to get there. And so, like, and they even get, Keith Stanfield gets his own subplot about, like, being gay, but, like, being so heavily involved in the church. And it's like, you would think that would be a big deal, but it's like, it just feels so underdeveloped, and feels like it hardly has a payoff, that it's like it teases you. It's like it shows you this cast, it shows you this subject matter, and it's like it's saying, look at all the possibilities. And then we just get a movie that's just kind of so dull, even if the performances are trying to bring it out. Obviously, Chiwetel Ejiofor, with a part like this, is going to do really good things with it. But it's like, just when it seems like it's going to really take off, it's like it just kind of stops itself almost intentionally before it can. It's like it's self-sabotage for some reason. And I can't quite piece together what they were even really going for, apart from just telling the story. Or maybe that was it. But I don't know. And it's also one of those cases where it's like, even though it feels like that, at the same time it's also like, so many scenes in the movie feel like they were made just specifically to be Oscar clips. And it's like, that obviously is going to lose its sincerity pretty fast. So, yeah, honestly, the main thing that it seems to be missing is that, for this kind of subject matter and the way the characters take it and the way it's being portrayed, it feels like there's no real edge to it. Like, this is something that kind of needed, and I know it's like, well, how far can you stray from the story and all that when you're telling it as a movie and stuff like that? And it's like, if you stick too close, you've got to make it, you know, you've got to make it a movie, because it's not a documentary. And if you have to, you know, make things a little bigger than they seemed, make things a little more dramatic than they might have actually been, it can really pay off in a good way, even if you stray from the story a little bit. But that's, yeah, it just seems to, like, really fall short of its potential in almost every aspect, and it's just becomes very forgettable very fast. So that's a shame. That's definitely a shame. Alright, let's go on to When We First Met and bring Adam Devine back into this. So we've got another kind of time warp kind of movie where we're stuck in time loop thing, which not only have we been having that recently in surge in popularity with, like, Before I Fall and Happy Death Day, we also got it with another Netflix movie last year. The Marlon Wayans movie Naked was another time loop movie. But this time, Adam Devine meets Alexandra Daddario at a Halloween party, and they end up becoming friends. So he's like, oh, well, if I could just go back in time, you know, make myself more than a friend, then we'll end up together, right? So he does that. And that's the thing, is the setup of this movie is, you know how, like, there are some of these classic romantic comedies that were, like, really popular, especially in, like, the 90s and the 2000s. And it's like, when you look back on them now, like, especially now, it's kind of, everybody's saying, like, you know, the male leads in romantic comedies were always kind of like fucking creepers, weren't they? And it's like, what they did was kind of, you know, morally fucked up. But it's like, that was then. You can say, like, oh, it was the 2000s, it was the early 2000s, it was the 90s, you know, it was, you know, we didn't notice stuff like that. It seemed romantic at the time. No, we are in 2018, when that's a popular thing to say, and this movie thinks it's being inventive. So, what do? We have a character played by Adam Devine, unappealing from the start because of this, and what happens here, though, is that she is with a dude that he admits right up is a nice guy. She wound up with a nice guy, which I guess he thinks makes it even more suck-ass, because then it makes her farther away from him. So he is going to go back in time and keep her from meeting this dude that's really great for her, so that he can be with her. The kind of guy that would do this. So you're like, oh, well, maybe he's a nice guy too. No, he's the kind of guy that would do this. So, what does that say? And so, obviously, we are going to get to a point to where it's like, maybe he'll realize at some point that he's a sleazebag. But the thing here is that that's like an hour and 10 minutes into this hour and a half or something movie. So an hour and 10 minutes of this movie is this dude doing this. It doesn't give you a good feel, especially as a full-on comedy. Oh no, it tries to be romantically dramatic occasionally, but for the most part, it's a real comedy about it. And what it does here also is it takes, like, once again, okay, before we go into that, let me also bring up, this is the movie reference thing again. He's obviously doing this, so what does he do? He sings the song from Back to the Future, and when he goes into... the one interesting thing they do here is that we see him alter the past, but then we get to see what that's done for the future each time before he gets to go back again. So we do get to see the aftermath, and we do get to see him deal with both. But the thing is that he jumps into the future, and he's like, because he goes back to the past, and it's 2014, and so for it to seem like it's not 2018, it's 2014. He says, you know, there's a reference to Frozen, and he's like, oh my god, I am in 2014. And number one, lazy-ass reference to Frozen, just because. But secondly, I'm pretty sure Frozen is just as referenced now as it was back then. Why they used this as the telling point, I don't know. That seems like a small thing, but it just goes right into the whole, everything feels like that. And then there's the whole, he works at a jazz club, which is a weird romantic comedy starring Adam Devine occupation to give him, and he plays the piano, and that's where they meet, and that's how he, like, woos her. So it's like, okay, so on top of the really heavy unwarranted movie references, are they La La Land now? Are they, like, trying to unironically be La La Land now? Or what the fuck is this jazz club bullshit? But, alright. So, it goes on from there. And the problem here is that he is devoid... I feel like not only is he just totally and completely not funny, but he is totally devoid of having chemistry with anybody. Maybe his buddies from Workaholics and Game Over Man or whatever, but romantically, no. Like, none of them. And what happens here also is that there's this thing that he does that he seems to think is hilarious, where he does, like, voices... Like, he's entertaining kindergartners, and that's his character. I think this is supposed to be charming and funny the way this dude acts. But no, it only amplifies this guy as a scumbag for doing the things that he does that might seem romantic at the time bullshit. So, none of this is really coming together. And eventually it turns into, it's basically Bedazzled. To where it's like, he goes back and he fixes it, and then the scenario plays out, and you're just waiting to see what it is that's going to go wrong. Even if it seems perfect, it's like, we know the punchline is going to be, something is terribly wrong. And a lot of times the payoffs are just like, that's it. That's what all the build-up was. And sometimes, like I said, it tries to be almost, like, dramatic about it, to where it's like, oh, that was actually poignant or whatever. Not really. The only time that it seems to get... another joke it totally steals is the, well, holy crap, I can actually speak another language thing from Dude, Where's My Car? I think that was in another movie, too. But it's like, if you're taking jokes that have already been taken from Dude, Where's My Car, exactly at what point in the barrel are you? But, alright. So, the only time it seems to really find its charm... which is not in the opening scenes with Alexander Daddario, where it's like we see them together and it's like, oh, look how lovable they are. Oh, they go together so well. It all feels very manufactured from the romantic comedy factory. But no, the only time it actually finds its charm is very late in the game, by the way, when there's a development with her best friend, I think, who is Shelley Hennig, the girl that I actually thought was really great in Unfriended, the lead in that, who's been in a couple of things since then, but her character actually does bring something to this that makes it worthwhile, and takes it in a direction to where it's kind of like, okay, I can maybe somewhat buy that. It does feel very much like the movie makes more out of it than we as an audience have seen. That makes it feel kind of forced and like a sudden direction for a climax. But it does, like I said, it does add something to the movie though, like a charm that it was trying for before that it didn't have until this point. That kind of makes it balance out a little bit. And it was like, okay, and overall it left enough of an impression to where it's like, maybe the movie's not as bad as it felt for a while there. So yeah, Michelle Ann kind of saves the day, I guess. But for the most part, like it's as good as a romantic comedy starring Adam Devine probably could be. Like this is probably, romantic comedies with Adam Devine have probably peaked. Because at least it was saved by a character late in the game. So at least there's that. Let's move on to Benji. There's Benji by way of Blumhouse, which is bizarre. But the thing here is that Benji's always been a weird case, because this is a series that's like just resurrected at the most random times when nobody's really thinking about it and nobody's really asking for it, or if they ever were. Because it's like that, obviously that, breed of dog is forever associated with that name, and it's like, we do know of, Benji's movies, but it's like, they're very, even going back to the first one in 1974 to now, to me anyway, I was never, even as like a huge dog person, I never really cared for the Benji movies. Even in 1974, coming from 1974, they always felt kind of dated and kind of dull, and there was something about them that was like, they're like overly cutesy is what they are. So it got to a point in this movie where, like I said, I was really thrown off by the fact that Blumhouse put this out. So it was like I was kind of looking for almost something that was self-aware. So it was like, there's a point in time where Benji like moves a dumpster, a full dumpster, so he can get up on it and do shit. And when I saw that dumpster thing, it was like, is this tongue-in-cheek? I feel like there is maybe a self-awareness trying to rear its head here. Or like when he tucks the mom into bed. And then it starts to occur to you as it goes on, it's like, nope, this is actually just disgustingly sincere. It's idiotically sincere. Which usually would be a compliment. But it's, like I said, it's just so, annoyingly cutesy that it doesn't, it's off-putting. Like I said, maybe people are into this, they see it as something innocent, something harmless, and that's great, but for some reason, the whole Benji thing just never worked for me. Like I said, starting in the 70s, and then it dropped off, and then it was like, wasn't there like a Chevy Chase movie that was like somewhat supposed to be connected? And then like in 2004, I still remember seeing the TV spots for Benji Off the Leash, which just seemed really fucking and then it disappeared again until now, I think. It's like, I don't know that I've met anybody that these actually appeal to, but I assume they appeal to people in some way because they just seem so excessively adorable or whatever. And they do the whole classic plot of the kids find the dog, the kids have to hide the dog from the parent finds out, and it's like, oh, fine, it's Beethoven, it's every fucking dog movie. But then there are some moments though that kind of stick out in a weird way, like, they're trying to name the dog, and they're fighting over what it's gonna be, and the kid says, I know, we'll name him Michael Jordan. And he shows his Michael Jordan figure. It's Jordan in his Bulls get up. So it's like, this is 2018, right? I don't think this kid was alive when Jordan played for the Bulls. Obviously, I don't, know too much shit about basketball at all, but I do think this kid may not have been alive when Jordan played for the Bulls, is what I'm saying. So, so that just seemed weird and outdated anyway. Like the dude that made it is the son of the dude that made the original movies. So it was like, it's always been some kind of family affair thing. Like, I think the daughter is, like, I don't know if it's his kid. She's also in the family, I think. So it's like, maybe this series means something to them, and that's good. But watching it, it's just like... And it just gets worse as it goes, because it does eventually... They eventually get kidnapped by robbers. Because once again, apparently this is a 90s movie. And the robbers are, like, wearing these masks, and they have, like, guns and shit. And it gets, like, really doomy when they're around. It's like, holy shit, this Benji movie just turned into the Blumhouse movie it promised to be. But in the wrong ways. It's like they're blending Benji and The Purge now. But then it's still just a dopey kids movie as it goes. There's a point in time where it's not like Benji is like a big, like some world-renowned character within the movie that everybody knows. It's not like fucking Ted or something. It's like everybody knows Benji's this hero or whatever. But the thing about it, though, what was weird was when they left, when the robbers left and they were driving, they'd kidnapped the children and they were driving away, Benji was chasing them on foot. And this guy looks in his mirror as he's speeding down the road and sees tiny little Benji running after the van. And he's like, ugh! And he's like swerving. And it's like, this dude is being chased in his van by Benji. And I think he's stressed out about it. So I don't know, and I don't think the rest of the movie is so fucking sincere in its bullshit that I don't think that's supposed to be a tongue-in-cheek thing. I think it's just something that's fucking dumb that happens to be in there. And as it goes on, like I said, it kind of really starts to take itself seriously. Like, its emotional point, how it portrays the robbers, how the dude from Fury Road and Insidious is in it as one of the kidnappers. He's got, like, his whole story here of how he's controlled by the other guy. The other guy that played young Woody Harrelson in Kingpin, is the other kidnapper. And there's, like, they try to do this whole thing and play it kind of serious, while still being this... It's like, you can sense they're trying to, like, recapture what kids' movies felt like back then. The only trouble is they picked, like, some of the worst kids' movies from that time period to invoke here, and it doesn't... Yeah, it really does not come off very well, and there's a lot of, you know, a dog walking around while touching music plays, or his sad eyes with piano music, and it's just really... It's just a lot of that shit. And yeah, you know what it felt like, honestly, is, you know, like, the stuff you hear about, like, Dalton Trumbo, where, like, once he was blacklisted, he went under a different name and just made money by writing just these shit scripts that would just sell easy and would just be made cheaply and all that. This feels like one of those. Like, it'd be one of those for, like, if there was a present-day Trumbo, it would be... We'd get movies like this from him under a different name, just so he could get paid. So, yeah, that's the kind of stuff that we're dealing with. But, you know, it could be worse. Because we have our next movie, which is Paradox. This is the second movie this year that Netflix has put out with Paradox in the title. And if you thought if you're one of those people that thought the Cloverfield Paradox was bad, you haven't seen Daryl Hannah write and direct a movie. Now, I have nothing against Daryl Hannah, at least I didn't before I'd seen Paradox. But I don't quite know what was going on with this. Because she wrote and directed this, and the thing about it is it kind of has like a documentary look. And it's like, you know, like in elementary school when you'd go on field trips to those places and you'd see like the people that were like in costume and in character and stuff like that. Where I was like, it was really, you know, cheesy and tacky and all that, but, you know, whatever. It's basically feels like a movie starring those people. In the worst way. Like in the worst possible scenario. But our lead here is Neil Young, the musician, yeah. And he's like I said, it looks like a documentary of sorts, with like reenactors or something, but no, apparently this is a plot. Apparently they play outlaws or something, and they're just walking through the desert. But then after a while they just start playing music, and then it tries to get all psychedelic and trippy, in the cheapest possible way. By psychedelic and trippy, I mean, like, they play their songs and, like, images of the moon come up over them. That's it. That's the whole movie, honestly. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but then some nice guy on, I think it was Letterboxd, just wrote a very small review, and it was like, it made perfect sense. It was like, that's exactly what this movie is. The guy, I may be paraphrasing, but the guy basically said of Paradox, did I just watch the country western version of The Room? It's like, that is exactly what that is. There's... And it's like, and it does have an air of pretension to it. I know that pretentious is an overused word, but that's not going to stop me from using it here. We've also got those random cuts of, like, you know when Rob Zombie desperately wants you to have a 70s feel, so there's be random cuts of stuff that looks like it's on, like, 70s film. Just random shots like that for no reason. And yeah, it's trying to do, like, a whole thing here in regards to, like, it looks like it's way in the past, like the 1800s or something. But then it's also, like, they've got, like, modern day music equipment that they play with. They're digging through the garbage and find computer parts. It doesn't fucking mean anything. It's just, and their big money shot, the big money shot of this movie is a recreation of, the scene from Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. Remember the girl that would float, and he had to, like, keep her from flying away by tying a rope to her? They just did that scene in this movie, even with no context. And that's supposed to be, I guess, the big moment where the movie takes off. But, on top of that, though, it's like, there's no... I would say that this movie is worst of the year quality because it's such an it's so short. It's like an hour and 10 minutes, but it's so excruciating to the point that it feels forever of just people basking in their own bullshit that means nothing to even if I question if this means anything to them. It is just so completely devoid of anything resembling anything worthwhile. But the thing is, so you think, you know, like, it must be bottom of the year material, but it's like, this movie is so insignificant, I would like to think it'll probably be totally out of my head by the time that time comes around, and it just I won't even bother. But I guess it would feel like that it's there. But but the thing here is that it's, okay, so remember, how Gamer, the Gerard Butler movie, was like, so if you go through all this bloodshed and you kill all these people and you survive this war zone, you can be free from prison. Where it's like, if you show prisoners this movie, even if they're on death row, if you show prisoners this movie and they make it from beginning to end, you could reward them by releasing them. I still don't think anybody would make it. I honestly don't know. I don't know if it's because that I've dealt with this bullshit before, that I was able to just kind of let it do its thing. Like, I watched Masked and Anonymous. I feel like I've been through this before. So it's like, if you thought Masked and Anonymous was bad and was just Bob Dylan up his own ass, I wouldn't even know how to begin to explain this to you. So that's, yeah, there's nothing else to say about it. That's all there is to it. That's it. So we're going to go right on to First Match, which is a movie where there is a girl in a rundown neighborhood who joins an all-male wrestling team. And obviously she's dealing with, like, her dad kind of being distant to her, and she's got a foster mom that she has a lot of trouble living with and all that. Just all those problems that come about that we see portrayed so many times in movies like this. But she does have a nice friendship with a guy, Omari, who is played by the guy his name has escaped me. The guy that played the teenage version of Kevin in Moonlight, who is like the only person in the movie I recognized. Very small cast, but these people, despite being names you may not recognize, a lot of the performances in this movie do sell it. Particularly our lead here, and it's one of those movies where it's basically about her and her journey as she goes through not just all the wrestling stuff, but all the stuff on the outside, too. And it does seem to be like, it seems to kind of want to be subtle about it, but also at the same time be like tough and hard hitting, especially with the content of her wrestling these dudes and getting the shit beat out of her and stuff like that, or beating the shit out of other people. But it does still feel like it falls short just a little bit, because it's one of those movies that may be a bit too subtle for its own good when it is being subtle, because it's like, it's one of those movies that knows that it's important to pause and just kind of let a character live in the moment and kind of let the audience kind of work that out while watching them through their actual subtleties, but it does still feel like that when it does take the time to pause, even though you can give it credit for knowing that it needs to pause, that's not always going to pay off if there's not a whole lot there to take in. But it's like you can still acknowledge that the moment is there, but it's got to have the content to back it up too. And this movie doesn't always follow up on that, but the performances still certainly have their moments to where they can really shine through and show you something about these characters, even if we don't feel as much for them as we probably should and we feel like we should by the way they're portrayed. But also, that's also helped by the scenes that aren't so quiet, where like they're actually interacting, and they do have some really good interaction scenes with each other, whether it be her dad or her friend or all that. It does work, but it does eventually fall into like, there's some subplots here that don't work or are totally meaningless. There's a boring ass subplot that you would think, if a movie knows what it's doing and wants to kind of, divert away from certain things, if there's one thing they wouldn't have done, it would have been a boring-ass subplot where she's attracted to one of the wrestlers. But we do end up going there, and it's as much of a drag as you imagine. And she does go through the predictable ups and downs, especially the downs. And there's something about it that just really kind of, it feels like even as small as it is, that there's something in here that could have really hit and been like, made it feel really powerful, even in a small way. But it just doesn't reach that. Like, it can't quite, find that sweet spot that hits it just the right way. It's just right there, but it just feels like it's almost too small for its own. Like I said, it almost tried too hard to be subtle and went a little too far. And then ultimately just kind of resulted in something that's okay, but you felt like there was a lot more potential for. But once again, an ending that leaves you saying, like, remembering the ending is probably going to make me think more fondly of this movie than I might actually as a whole. But it is a nice close to it, so it has that going for it. So it's fine. It's another one where I'd say, like, if given compared to everything else we're looking at, it's worth checking out for the most part. Alright, let's go on to Happy Anniversary. The movie I should have done it towards the top, because I was dreading coming to it, because I just really, after finally getting through it, I don't really want to live it anymore, but I guess I can talk about it real quick before I can block that in my head forever. So it is, we have Ben Schwartz from, like, House of Lies, and I think Noelle Wells, who I think is on Master of None. And they're a couple who seem like they're ridiculously happy. They've been together for 3 years, but there's, like, no marriage plans and all that. They're just a couple who is fine and comfortable where they are, supposedly. But then we see them, they try to do this in a subtle way, I guess, when they pull up to their house and they're happy and they're laughing, they're playing a game and all that. And they're like, hey, we've been together for 3 years. Yeah, 3 years. And then they just get, like, really solemn. And then that basically tells us everything we need to know about this couple, but the rest of the movie is going to keep going and tell us more. So what we have here is yet another one of those movies where it desperately wants to feel real. It wants couples to watch this movie and be like, oh, that's totally us, or it's like, oh, we so know those people. But the thing is that it seems so obsessed with being real about itself. Yet, we get a flashback very early on. The whole, like, half the movie is flashbacks to their shitty relationship and how they've gotten to where they are now. That parallel thing I was kind of looking for in Irreplaceable You is basically what this movie is, only terrible. So, when it starts, it's really trying to play up this real thing. Yet, when they meet, it's like, they've met for like 20 seconds, and they're in a romantic comedy. Just like that. And it's like that completely takes away anything they may or may not have accomplished with the whole look how realistic we are setup. So, and it goes on that even further. When they get mad at each other, she goes and stays with her parents. He goes to his one-liner cracking sports playing buddy. And they talk about their bullshit. And it's like, once again, I feel like this movie thinks it's being original or fresh or something. But I don't know how you can possibly see that in any of this. And then as it goes on, there's like, you can tell through the dialogue that whoever wrote this thinks it's witty and like reads well and comes out and makes it seem like these conversations are natural and real. But the thing about it is that it's one of those cases where they're trying so hard to be clever about their dialogue, it feels more like, it feels less like it's actually coming out of people's mouths and more like, it's not even so much that you're hearing it, it feels like when you hear it that you're reading it right off of a script page. Which is bad. That is not how it should come off if it's going to seem natural. So it goes on and on with like that, but then we start to see more of the downsides of this relationship. And it's like, okay, yes, basically the concept of the movie is relationships are tough. As if anybody needed to be told that, this movie's going to beat a big old message over your head that says that for its whole runtime. Which feels like an eternity, once again, is only about an hour and 10 minutes. It's a fucking trend. So, as that goes on, we see them, and it's like, we're supposed to think they're lovable and all that, but of course they're going to get mad, they're going to yell at each other, they're going to have stupid arguments and all that. But this is the kind of guy where he actually says, at one point, while they're fighting, something along the lines of, she says like, oh, are you happy now? And he says, yeah, I'd be happy if you were dead. It's like, okay. And then they try to back that up. They try to fix that horrible character trait by having him later say, I say stuff, but it's like, it's stuff that I don't mean, but it just comes out. And it's like, even if that kind of stuff, if sentences like that just come out, I don't know how this person has lived with you for 3 years, or how you could possibly really feel about this person if that stuff just comes tumbling out. Maybe that's a normal thing for people I've never met, and it's like, maybe I'm just, have some unrealistic idea of how you actually, how far you go when you're fighting with somebody you love, supposedly. But yeah, I don't know. I just can't really imagine that, I'd be happy if you were dead is redeemable, especially if it's something that's not particularly throwaway. You put all your hatred and venom into it when you say it. And I get it. I get the whole, oh, this person got to me, I really want to hurt them. But that whole thing just felt so off. Even from the rest of the movie. The rest of the movie is still this bottom-of-the-barrel bullshit, but I mean, that just really stood out to me as a what the fuck kind of thing. That probably should not have been in there, and it felt like a point of no return of this character. It doesn't matter how much he calls himself out on it and says, I can't believe I said that. It's like, well, neither can any other fucking one of us. But no, we still are left with supposedly wanting them to stay together, despite all the shit that we see. But it's like, and they're maybe trying to do something, but it's like, by playing up like, oh, not all relationships are perfect in movies, But it all feels so fucking mixed up, and there's like such a weird ass, combating message here, and it's like I said, we're supposed to feel good when they're together, we're supposed to feel bad when they're not, but this. Really, both of them are just. I don't know. I can't fucking deal with this movie. I can't do that. And it's like there's always, because of that stuff, like whether it be some stupid joke, or like a joke that goes nowhere, especially, or something like that. Then they go on and they try to be heartfelt. It's like anytime they try to do something heartfelt, it's always canceled out by another scene like this, or some contrived bullshit or whatever. And I God. But the thing is, it's like, okay, so the point is, it's like, this is how real relationships look. But it's like, real, 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 and then it just ends, even though a lot of the good stuff feels like right out of the shittiest of romantic comedies, the most, you know, unrealistic of the romantic comedies. There's... Okay, so they're trying to be real. Okay, but then what's your point? Then what? I don't... I don't know. There's no point. It's one thing. I think it's mostly supposed to be a comedy, but it's not funny. They gave Joe Pantoliano's character cancer. The only reason they did this is so they could set up an ending scene so that she has a wig on hand. They gave an entire character cancer because they needed a payoff where she needed to wear a wig and have one at the ready. This is where this movie is. And this scene is played up for romance, by the way. So, I'm sure Joe Pantoliano appreciates that. More pointless movie references, by the way. A few, at least. The Hurt Locker is name dropped for no goddamn reason, among others, I'm sure. So yes, all this so that we can say, hey guys, did you know that relationships are tough? I'll bet you didn't. We're going to show you what it's really like, because we... The next movie, which is not going to settle me down, is Dude. Dude is a movie that I thought maybe there was going to be a bit something, like maybe Netflix was selling this movie short. It was selling itself short. Because the description was like, 5 girls hang around and get high. That's basically what the description was. And that's what the movie is. It's like, okay, if you're going to do like maybe a Linklater style thing, it's like, sometimes that's all you need. It's just people sitting around getting high, whatever. So we let the movie go, and we learn right away, immediately, this is going to be one of those movies that says, look how raunchy and dirty yet also relatable our characters are. So these girls, like, there's one girl in particular where, like, the movie has just started. It's like one of the first lines of the movie. And the 5 girls are, like, just being themselves. They're talking, they're doing whatever. And then they show up at a party. And then when they get out of the car, the first thing this girl says when she walks up to the party is, "Where the dick at?" Now, the thing about this is that, yeah, it's the number one problem is it feels like it's trying way too hard to be raunchy and dirty and all that, when it's basically like, it feels more like a 12-year-old wrote it trying to sound raunchy and dirty. But no, on top of this, this is basically this girl's entire character. The whole time. And so we have to deal with that. But there's 4 other characters as well. And so, when we go on here, also bringing in, you know, brilliant dialogue, like, this is how desperate they are to sound like sexual and dirty, while also fitting in their references, which I've talked about. She's talking about a guy that she's attracted to, and they think he sort of looks like Harry Potter, especially with his glasses. And so she says something, I'm probably paraphrasing, but it was something along the lines, it was something as mundane and nonsensical as, "Oh yeah, he has those Harry Potter glasses, I love them." And her response is, "Yeah, he can Harry Potter me anytime." Dialogue like that is what populates this movie. So, and it also gets to the point to where, once again, like Happy Anniversary, they think they can get away with it by calling themselves out, but they can't. There's one point where, now once again, you want to prove, it's the bridesmaid syndrome. It's like the whole thing of, we wrote this movie specifically so that we can say, oh, not all raunchy comedies need to be guy movies. We can have raunchy comedies that are movies for women as well, to show how funny women can be. So what kind of jokes can we do with that? I felt like this movie was the screenwriter was being paid a specific amount of money for every one single time they used the word tampon, for how many times it shows up. And of course, we do have one scene where they really go overboard with it, and the scene ends with a dude saying, "I think this is the most times I've ever heard the word tampon all at once in my life." And it's like, that's great. You can still call it out, but your desperation still stands. And by the way, the person that wrote this is the person that is writing Ocean's 8. Now, I'm one of those people where I wasn't all up in arms about Ocean's 8 when people are saying, like, you know, oh, they're just doing it for the sake of it, and it's like, it's pointless, it's all that other stuff. I'm indifferent to Ocean's 8's existence. I don't fucking care. But now I do care, because if this is what we have to look forward to, that movie is not gonna that movie is not gonna survive if this writer carries that over into this, because we have stuff where once again everything is getting canceled out because they're trying to do the whole thing to where they play it up like they're doing the whole everything has to be raunchy thing, everything has to be dirty thing, everything has to be a dick joke or a tampon joke or whatever the fuck. They also bring drugs into it too. And, you know, masturbation. There's the whole thing where, like, apparently the girl does that, but then the other girl claims, dude, I masturbate in the bathroom at school, like, every day. But the thing here is that what they do is that they try to also put in these really, not only heartfelt moments, but, like, really serious issues about, like, death. Because one, like, it's the girl's brother, who is also her boyfriend, who, like, dies in a car accident or something in the opening scene. And the scenes when they deal with his death are supposed to be, like, really, really serious and, like, really, really heavy. Number one, even if this was an entirely serious movie, this writer could not pull this off. But what makes it worse is that it's surrounded by this other bullshit that I've mentioned. And you can just imagine how much this just does not mesh at all. This whole video feels so redundant because all these movies have the same goddamn problem. This is why I just kind of wanted to abandon Netflix movies altogether. And yeah, I guess this is my own doing. I could have reviewed Tully by itself instead of waiting another week to do it with another movie. I could have avoided watching 16 Netflix movies. But like I said, maybe I wasn't giving them enough of a chance. Maybe there were, you know, some ones that were hidden in here that were actually really good that maybe just nobody saw, so nobody was talking about them. But this is what we've got. They actually make this and think this shit works. They think this is good. They think this is relatable to its audience. And yeah, like I was talking about with the Workaholics guys. Yes, I know Lucy Hale is on a popular show. I think it's Pretty Little Liars. That does not mean that the movies that she's in are going to be good because she was in a TV show. I heard this shit when she did Truth or Dare. Still not working. It does not work. Now I was talking about, okay, this has been the recurring thing. The pointless movie references seem to be plaguing these Netflix comedies. So, what we've got here is a guy plays the guitar for her. And he's like Alex Wolff. The decent Wolff brother. The one that's not, you know, the bane of my existence. But, of course, because he sang a song to a girl, a reference must be made. Because there is no other possible dialogue that can be used here. There is absolutely nothing else we can say. We need the fucking crutch of other people's stuff. So, of all the different things he could say to her after playing her a song, his line must be, "Sorry that I'm not Heath Ledger." Did you get that, guys? He's talking about 10 things I hate about you. Did you get that? He's making a reference, but they're not done either. Okay, so yeah, okay, he didn't flat out say 10 things I hate about you. I guess that's worthy of credit? I don't know. So let's have the other scene. Let's have the scene when they're floating in the pool, and we catch them in mid-conversation, and so she's just like, yeah, the world's gonna end. It's gonna be like, I am legend. And then another girl just floats by and says, yeah, I am legend. I swear to fucking Christ, the dialogue is just them saying the titles of movies now. They're not even referencing them anymore. It's like it got worse as it went. And I was watching Game Over Me, and it's like, God, they're really using movie references as a crutch here. And it's like I was in the fucking Twilight Zone as they kept going. It was like every fucking one of them does it. I felt like I was losing my mind. But yeah, so anyway, then we go on and it's all the regular teenage humor. For no reason at all, there's its own scene which has no consequences after. There's nothing leading up beforehand. It's just its own scene where a dog accidentally takes drugs. And it talks to another animal and they subtitle it. In the middle of this teen comedy drama thing. Also dealing with death. If this was meant to be, like, show off teenage girls in, like, an exaggerated way, like in a satirical way, this movie might be on the verge of working. But once again, with this death stuff thrown in, I think it's being totally serious about itself. And it's like, hey, look how relatable these pieces of shit are. And we just have to watch. And it's not really about anything. It doesn't go anywhere. And it just... Oh, they graduate. By the way, they went to school. They eventually will graduate. But no, that's their ending. It's like, well, we needed to stop somewhere. Thank the fuck they stopped at some point, but... Yeah, so there's that. And oh yeah, and if you're wondering what the title refers to, you know how it's like, obviously, you know, they're teenagers, they're gonna call each other dude. But it's like, I don't recall, unless it was just really casually in there to the point that didn't even really register with me, there's like no scenes that stand out where they call each other dude. But then there's one scene where they all do it like 20 times. And then that just never happens again. That's where the title came from. This person wrote Ocean's 8. And that's coming out soon. And they got, like, the cast list that they did for that. So, we'll see how that turns out. The last movie, finally, thank God, is going to be Candy Jar. A movie that starts off like it's going to be really obvious. We've got Jacob Lattimore and we've got Sammy Gale. And there are two people that are on like the debate team, but they come from opposite backgrounds and they hate each other because of that. They're just like, you know, foes for life. And because Jacob Lattimore is like really rich, he's got a really nice car, and his mom, Uzo Aduba, is like, you know, went to all the great schools and knows all the connections and all that. And then we got Sammy Gale over here who's poor, and her mom, Christina Hendricks, can't really do anything about that, and she just kind of has to hope for the best for her and all that, but because that's really much all they have to go on. So they're both going to do their best to be on this debate team and go through this whole competition thing. And they both see the same kind of like counselor, like school counselor, who is Helen Hunt. And the thing, though, is that I do like that it's a territory that's not overly explored yet. The whole debate thing, there's like, well, I mean, obviously, you know, the Denzel movie, I guess, but then there's also stuff like, there's the bad, and then there's the, you know, decent, like Rocket Science is like kind of the indie movie that went into this territory. But then you have stuff like Listen to Me with Kirk Cameron from the 80s. I think that's all I need to say about that for you to know its quality. So watching this, it was like, even though it's about two characters that start off hating each other, there's something surprisingly good-natured about the movie's feel in general. Like, it's very upbeat. It's got a sense of humor. It's actually can be funny. There's a nice opening scene with the principal, who is Tom Bergeron, who plays... He only has a couple of scenes, but he actually plays them nicely. And yeah, the characters work together well, and it's... I mean, the debate stuff can seem a bit like... it gets a bit redundant and it can be a bit annoying with how they kind of show it, but for the most part it does work. Hold on, I'm getting there. And they do have, like, it's really refreshing that when they do start to like each other, and it's a really sweet scene when they realize it too. The connection that they have is they both get dressed up to go to the movies alone. And it's like, what sweeter thing could two people have in common? Thinking they hate each other. So it's like that was really nice, and they had a really nice thing going on here. There's at one point it seemed like they were gonna fuck up the whole. It felt so refreshing because their relationship was so platonic, but it does end up being fine, and the rivalry ends up being more between Uzo Aduba and Christina Hendricks. Once again, that also feels a bit good natured because Uzo Aduba is not the kind of character that like necessarily looks down on people, and Christina Hendricks is like trying to hide her poverty from her. And those scenes work well too, as like kind of a side thing to their, and kind of a contrast to what they're doing, and kind of how the opposite things are going on. It really actually does kind of play out nicely. We do have another character, an entire character that is based solely on his entire dialogue is movie quotes, and this is used as a joke. He does the "not my tempo" thing from Whiplash, and when they don't get it, he says, Whiplash, J.K. Simmons, he won an Academy Award. It goes through the whole thing. And it's like they just decided to just not do dialogue anymore. It's like, let's just put down movie facts, because we have gaps here. And then he goes through the whole Fight Club speech twice at the end. So that was annoying. And like I said, it just got worse, the constant movie references in these movies, but still, at least it was just one character, but I mean, even so, there's a problem when one character's entire dialogue is copy and paste from other movies. But anyway, going on this also, it is nice, and it keeps up that niceness for a while, but then we get to a point to where there is a character that we lose from out of nowhere, and it is like Bridge to Terabithia levels of out of nowhere. And that seems very abrupt, and just like an odd thing to suddenly add conflict that just happens. There's like no build up to it. Maybe the suddenness is supposed to be it. I don't know, but it just felt very. We really need something that's going to hit the rest of the characters hard. This is easy enough. They just Nicholas Sparks their way out of it, or into it, or whatever the fuck. So that felt a little lazy and like kind of just cheap shock value or whatever, to somewhat change the direction we're going in, or to motivate other characters or whatever. So that, yeah, and then we eventually get to a really obvious climax that has a nice message, but overall made me realize how forgettable the movie's probably going to be in the long run. But yeah, it's once again, it's sweet-natured and it's nice, and the cast is really good, and especially with each other, and it's nice. But like I said, it's maybe slight to a fault, and it'll probably be really forgettable. So yeah, I'm ready to just end this fucking video now. So that's what we have. So I am going to next week team up Tully and Breaking In, because I'm a sucker for those. This should have been released in the 90s thrillers. I think I'm finally going to see that religious movie with Dennis Quaid or whatever. So just basically all the shit that was in this past couple of weeks that didn't want to compete, that was here because nobody else could compete with Infinity War, so they just had no choice but to release here. So, and then more verses and all that other stuff. So that's why I don't jump right on Netflix movies when they come out most of the time. So we'll see what the second half of the year and all that brings for them, but that's what we've got for now, so we'll beware.